You don't become unbothered by pretending not to care. You become unbothered when you've been bruised, shattered, and still choose not to shrink. You don't build peace by avoiding the fire. You build peace by walking through it and deciding you won't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. There was a season in my life where every step I took, every word I spoke, every decision I made felt like it was under surveillance. Not by cameras, not by the world, but by the imaginary council I had built in my own head. This council was made up of people whose opinions I gave too much power to. Family, colleagues, friends, even strangers who wouldn't remember my name 5 minutes later. It's astonishing how we hand over the keys to our self-worth without even realizing it. I remember this one day vividly. I was in a meeting and someone made a comment about my work. Something small, probably insignificant to anyone else, but I spiraled. I spent hours replaying that moment, obsessing over what I should have said, what I could have done to make them think better of me. I twisted myself in knots trying to craft a perfect, polished version of me that would be impossible to criticize. By the time I got home, I was emotionally wrung out. I sat in my parked car, engine off, just staring out the windshield as tears slid down my face. It wasn't their words that broke me. It was the crushing weight of how much I let them matter. I realized that day, sitting in silence, that I was carrying the burden of everyone else's opinions, and I was suffocating under it. I had built an entire life centered around being palatable, agreeable, easy to like, and I was exhausted. The truth is, I wasn't living, I was performing. I was editing myself to be digestible, to fit rooms I had outgrown, to appease people who didn't even really know me. When I started reading about human behavior and the psychology of belonging, something clicked. We are biologically wired for connection, but somewhere along the way, we confuse belonging with approval. We think if people approve of us, then we belong. But real belonging doesn't ask you to shave down your edges. It doesn't demand that you shrink. It says, come as you are, whole, messy, unapologetic. And I realized I was giving people rental access to my worth. People who hadn't earned the right to speak into my life. People whose absence would not collapse my world, but whose disapproval I was terrified of. That day in my car, I made a quiet vow to myself. You will not spend another season performing for people who don't even see you. You will not exhaust yourself to make strangers comfortable. And it's not that I magically stopped caring overnight. No. It's a slow, painful unlearning. Every day I had to remind myself, you are allowed to disappoint people. You are allowed to not meet their expectations. You are allowed to belong fully to yourself. Here's the raw, unspoken truth. You will never taste peace if you keep renting out your self-worth to people passing by. You don't owe your life to their opinions. You owe it to yourself to finally live. When I stopped performing for people's acceptance, I didn't arrive at happiness, I arrived at loneliness. Nobody tells you that when you begin to choose your own peace over keeping everyone else comfortable, you don't get applause. You often get silence. And sometimes that silence feels brutal. There's this part of us that believes if we do the right thing, if we grow, if we heal, people will cheer for us. But the truth? Some people are only comfortable with the version of you that stayed small. When you stop answering every text immediately, when you stop agreeing just to keep the water smooth, when you stop twisting yourself to meet the expectations of others, you don't just lose noise, you lose people. I remember one of the loneliest nights of my life. I had made a decision that was right for me, but inconvenient for someone I cared about. I thought they would understand. I thought they would respect it. Instead, they withdrew. They didn't yell. They didn't fight. They just slowly disappeared. I sat with my phone in my hand, waiting for a message that never came. And that silence, it felt like punishment. It felt like I had chosen wrong. It felt like I was alone because I wasn't enough. What I didn't know then is that peace often comes wrapped in loneliness. At first, when you break the habit of over-explaining, when you stop over-giving, when you let go of relationships that were built on your self-abandonment, you will feel a hollow space. It's real, and it's terrifying. I remember pacing in my living room thinking, did I push people away, or did I finally stop chasing them? Psychology tells us this is called withdrawal pain. It's what happens when you step out of a trauma bond, when you stop seeking external validation. Your brain goes into panic mode because the familiar cycles, even if they were unhealthy, brought you comfort. And that's where most people run back. They can't stand the silence. They can't stand the loneliness. So they trade their peace to fill the empty space. But here's the thing. If you can stay, if you can endure the ache of letting go, if you can sit with the quiet long enough, that loneliness begins to soften into something else, something deeper, something whole. You realize you are not lonely. You are with yourself. And you are finally enough company. You begin to find new people, the ones who don't need you to perform, the ones who love you without needing you to shrink, but they only show up after you clear the space. The truth nobody says out loud is this: sometimes the price of peace is the crowd, but the reward is your soul coming home to itself. And once you've known that kind of peace, you'll never beg to be understood again. There's a quiet, almost invisible kind of prison we don't talk about enough. It's the prison we build when we start believing the stories other people tell about us, not the ones we tell ourselves, not the truth of who we are, but the stories projected onto us by the people around us. It took me years to realize how much of my life was shaped by what others projected onto me. You're too sensitive. You're too distant. You're too much. You're too cold. You're not enough. And because I wanted to belong, because I wanted to be loved, I carried those words like labels I had no permission to remove. I internalized them. I thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I am the problem. I remember being told by someone I deeply cared about that I had changed. The way they said it, it wasn't a compliment, it was an accusation. As if my growth was an act of betrayal. As if I was supposed to stay trapped in the version of me that they found manageable. And I wrestled with that for a long time. Was I selfish? Was I becoming hard? Was I losing my compassion? But here's what I learned through my own therapy and deep work. When you stop making yourself available for someone's convenience, when you start setting boundaries, when you choose your own well-being over their comfort. They call it selfish. Not because you are, but because you're no longer playing by their rules. Projection is a defense mechanism. It's when people throw their unhealed wounds at you like darts and say, here, hold this, it's yours now. But it's not. It never was. And if you're not careful, if you're not awake, you will pick up those darts and pierce your own skin. There's something called cognitive distortion in psychology. It's when people twist reality to fit their emotional state. When they feel abandoned, when they feel small, suddenly you're too much. When they feel weak, suddenly you're controlling. And here's the trap. If you keep living to correct everyone's misunderstanding of you, you will spend your life chained to their projections. You don't owe anyone an endless explanation. You don't need to shrink to be digestible. And you certainly don't need to carry the weight of someone else's unfinished healing. I remember writing in my journal one night, "I cannot keep shrinking to fit the frame someone else painted of me." I realized I had to stop fighting to be seen accurately by people committed to misunderstanding me. I had to stop begging for fair trials in courts where the verdict had already been written. The deepest freedom comes when you can stand in the storm of someone else's projection and say, "This is not mine to carry." Let them think you're cold. Let them think you've changed. Let them think you're selfish. You don't have to live inside their cage. The truth? Be so deeply anchored in who you are that the weight of their projections can no longer bend you. When you stop renting your identity to other people's stories, you finally come back to yourself. And that's where peace lives. There's a power most of us never learn because we're too busy defending ourselves. It's the sacred, quiet power of non-reaction. The ability to sit in the middle of someone else's storm and not get swept away by it. I learned this lesson the hard way. There was a time when I thought I had to explain myself to everyone. When someone misjudged me, I explained. When someone attacked me, I defended. When someone poked at my boundaries, I justified. I used to think silence meant weakness, that not responding was like surrendering the fight. I thought if I didn't speak up, they would win. But what I didn't understand is sometimes engaging is what costs you your peace. Sometimes defending yourself pulls you deeper into someone else's dysfunction. Sometimes the need to win the argument is exactly what keeps you tied to people who were never safe for you to begin with. I remember one moment that changed me. Someone I loved, someone I had spent years trying to keep close, came at me with a tidal wave of accusations. Words that were sharp, designed to provoke, crafted to hook me back into an old fight I had already outgrown. I could feel it in my body, my chest tightening, my throat burning with words I wanted to say back. But something in me paused. Something in me whispered, "You don't have to pick this up. You don't have to carry this fight." And for the first time, I didn't. I stayed quiet. I didn't explain. I didn't defend. I didn't fix their story about me. And in that silence, I felt something I had never felt before. Not weakness, not defeat, but peace, power. There is a sacred power in not reacting. It's the moment you realize you're no longer owned by the emotional bait of other people. It's when you stop being a puppet to their strings. It's when you finally reclaim your energy and your time and your soul. Psychology tells us the nervous system can be rewired. You can teach yourself to pause, to breathe, to soothe yourself instead of firing back. Reactivity is not your destiny, it's a habit, and habits can be unlearned. When you react, you give away your control. When you respond with silence, you stand in your own authority. But make no mistake, silence is not avoidance. Silence is a decision. Silence is presence. Silence is choosing yourself over a fight that would never lead to resolution anyway. I used to think strength was in how fast I could clap back. Now I know strength is in how gently I can hold my own boundary without the need to prove anything. The people who demand you fight for their version of the story are the same ones who will never believe your side anyway. Let them misunderstand you. Let them spin their narrative. Let them poke and prod and try to pull you back in. You don't have to react. You don't have to be available for every battle. You don't have to carry every invitation to chaos. Protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. Not everyone deserves your words. Not everyone deserves your energy. Some things are best met with a quiet, steady, sacred no. There's a dangerous myth we buy into when we talk about becoming unbothered. The myth that to be unbothered is to stop caring, to shut down, to build walls so high that nothing and no one can touch you. But that's not what true peace looks like. That's not what wholeness feels like. Becoming unbothered is not becoming numb. It's not abandoning your heart. It's not losing your ability to feel. It's not choosing coldness over connection. For a long time, I confused the two. I thought if I could harden enough, if I could numb myself to pain, then nothing would get to me. So I tried. I stopped sharing. I stopped letting people in. I wore this mask of I don't care because I thought that would protect me. But all it did was isolate me. I wasn't unbothered. I was disconnected. I wasn't at peace. I was frozen. The thing about building walls is that they don't just keep out the pain. They also keep out the joy. They keep out love. They keep out the very thing we are wired for, human connection. I remember a conversation with someone who loved me enough to tell me the truth. They said, "You're acting like nothing matters, but I can see it does. You still care. You're still tender. You just don't trust anyone to hold that anymore." And they were right. What I really wanted wasn't to stop feeling. What I really wanted was to feel safe while I felt. I wanted to love without being destroyed. I wanted to trust without losing myself. I wanted to care without being consumed. I had to learn that becoming unbothered isn't about building walls. It's about building boundaries. It's about knowing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. It's about learning to sit with your emotions instead of being hijacked by them. It's about choosing your responses instead of being dragged by your reactions. Psychology tells us that people who have healthy, secure boundaries aren't less emotional. They're actually more emotionally available because they trust themselves to navigate pain without collapsing. Becoming unbothered doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've trained yourself to feel wisely. It means you've built a home inside yourself where you can hold your own heart without needing someone else to carry it. It's the difference between saying, "I don't care what anyone thinks," and "I care deeply about the right things, and I no longer exhaust myself on what doesn't matter." It's the quiet strength of being able to say, "I can stay soft and I can still walk away. I can love and I can still have limits. I can listen and I can still choose silence." Becoming unbothered is not an escape from life. It's a wiser, braver way of living inside it. I remember writing this to myself during one of the hardest seasons of letting go. You are allowed to care. You are allowed to cry. You are allowed to be hurt. But you are no longer allowed to abandon yourself in the process. That became my compass. That became my practice. Because in the end, becoming unbothered is not about building a fortress. It's about building trust within yourself. It's about knowing that you can stand in the middle of love, loss, betrayal, misunderstanding, and still hold yourself steady. Unbothered doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you finally learned what's worth feeling for. You will know you are growing when peace feels more urgent than proving your point, when you no longer explain yourself to be liked, when you can hold the storm and still choose stillness. Train yourself to be unbothered, not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. Because you've finally come home to yourself and you are not willing to leave.